Beneath the administrative heart of Manhattan, 58 feet below the intersection of Murray Street and Broadway, there exists a station that should not exist. City Hall Loop has been closed to the public for 80 years. Its turnstiles were removed in December 1945. Its platform has not seen a paying passenger since New Year's Eve of that year, but the lights have never been turned off. The decision to close the station was presented as a matter of practicality. The platform curve was too tight. Modern subway cars were too long. The gaps between the platform's edge and the train doors had become unsafe. These were the official explanations entered into Metropolitan Transportation Authority records. These were the reasons cited in internal memoranda dated January 1946. But certain maintenance logs from the final months of operation tell a different story. Construction of the station began in March 1900 under the direction of the Interborough Rapid Transit Company. The chief engineer was William Barclay Parsons. The architects were Hines and Lafarge, who had designed the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. The contractor was John B. McDonald. These names appear in the dedication plaques. What does not appear in any official documentation is the number of men who died during the excavation. More than 100 workers were killed building the first 13 miles of tunnel. 3 serious accidents were officially acknowledged. A dynamite explosion on January 27, 1902, at Park Avenue and 41st Street killed 5 men and bankrupted the initial contractor. This is documented. What is less documented is that the highest concentration of worker deaths occurred in a 3-month period during the excavation beneath City Hall Park. The geological surveys from 1899 noted unusual soil composition at depth. The bedrock beneath Lower Manhattan is typically Manhattan schist, predictable and stable, but at the precise location where the loop would be constructed, surveyors encountered something they described as void spaces. The term appears 11 times in the preliminary reports. Void spaces beneath solid bedrock, cavities that should not exist according to the geological understanding of the period. Work proceeded anyway. The city required a grand ceremonial station. Mayor Robert Van Wyck had promised the public an underground palace. The station would feature vaulted ceilings designed by Rafael Guastavino, whose patented tile technique created self-supporting arches without the need for internal framework. Brass chandeliers would hang from the curved ceiling. Skylights would be installed in the park above, filtering natural light down through colored glass. It would be the jewel of the system. But the men digging the tunnel reported problems. The void spaces were larger than the survey suggested. In some sections, excavation crews broke through the rock face into chambers that had not been marked on any geological map. The foreman's daily logs from June through August 1902 mentioned these discoveries with increasing frequency. June 14th, east wall gave way into open space approx 8 feet depth. July 3, crew refused to work after dark. Sounds from adjoining tunnel section. July 29, air quality poor, men complaining of pressure in ears and difficulty breathing when working alone. The construction proceeded 24 hours a day in 3 shifts. The night shift filed the most unusual reports. Workers described the sensation of being watched from the incomplete sections of the tunnel. Tools went missing and reappeared in areas that had not yet been excavated. On August 12, 1902, a night crew foreman named Patrick Sullivan wrote in his log that 3 men had failed to report to the surface at shift change. A search party found them unconscious in the unfinished loop section. All 3 were hospitalized. The medical records indicate they were treated for exposure, though the temperature in the tunnel was recorded at 68 degrees. The station opened on October 27, 1904, with great ceremony. Mayor George B. McClellan drove the inaugural train from City Hall to 145th Street and back. More than 150,000 people rode the subway on its first day of operation. The newspapers called it a triumph of modern engineering. The station itself was photographed extensively. The images show the Guastavino Kyles in their original terracotta glory, the brass fixtures gleaming, the skylights emitting shafts of sunlight into the underground space. But from the beginning, the station had operational difficulties that were not related to the curve of the platform. Lights failed with unusual frequency in the loop section. Electrical systems required constant maintenance. The official explanation was that the curved track created vibrations that loosened the wiring, but maintenance records indicate that the electrical failures occurred even during periods when no trains were running through the loop. In the first year of operation, station agents assigned to City Hall Loop began requesting transfers to other locations. The personnel files show an unusually high turnover rate. The reasons given were always vague. One agent, Thomas Brennan, submitted a request in November 1904 stating that he could no longer work the late shift due to conditions inconsistent with railway operation. His transfer was approved without further questions. The agents who remained noticed patterns. The skylights, which were supposed to provide natural illumination during daylight hours, seemed to dim even when the sun was directly overhead. The effect was subtle but measurable. Light meters installed in 1907 as part of an electrical efficiency study recorded illumination levels that were consistently lower than the calculated values based on the skylight apertures and sun position. The discrepancy was never adequately explained. The chandeliers presented another problem. They were designed to remain stationary, but agents reported that they would sometimes sway when no trains were approaching. The movement was slight, often attributed to air currents from the tunnel ventilation system, but it occurred even when the ventilation fans were not operating. Passengers used the station without incident, for the most part. The records show normal traffic patterns through the 1910s and 1920s, but there are scattered reports in the Transit Authority complaint files. A woman in 1913 reported that her young daughter refused to exit the train at City Hall, claiming there was someone standing on the platform who was not supposed to be there. In 1921, a man filed a complaint stating that he had waited on the platform for 40 minutes in the middle of the day without seeing another passenger or agent, despite the fact that trains were running on their normal schedule. The station began closing at night in 1923. The official reason was economic. Late-night traffic did not justify keeping the station staffed. Trains would bypass City Hall after a certain hour and continue through the loop without stopping. This arrangement continued for 22 years until the station closed permanently. But in those final years, the maintenance crews who worked in the loop after hours began to notice something that was not recorded in any official log. The power to the station had never been reduced. Every light remained operational. The chandeliers stayed lit even when there was no need for them. And occasionally, very occasionally, someone would see movement on the platform through the window of a passing train. Movement that would stop the moment the observer focused on it, as though whatever was there understood it was being watched. The architecture of City Hall Loop represents both an achievement and a miscalculation. Rafael Guastavino's tile vaulting system was revolutionary in its application to subway construction. The interlocking terracotta tiles created a self-supporting structure that distributed weight evenly across the curved surface. This was an engineering triumph. But the system also created acoustic properties that were not anticipated during the design phase. Sound behaves differently in a Guastavino vaulted space. The curved tiles reflect and amplify certain frequencies while dampening others. In cathedrals, this creates the reverberant quality that enhances organ music and choral singing. In a subway station, it creates something else. The sound of an approaching train does not build gradually. Instead, it manifests suddenly, as though the train has materialized rather than traveled through space to reach the platform. Station agents in the 1920s and 1930s documented this effect in their incident reports. The official term was acoustic anomaly. Trains would appear without the usual warning sounds of wheels on rails, metal against metal, the electrical hum of the motors. Passengers waiting on the platform would report being startled by trains that seemed to arrive without announcement. But there were other sounds. The maintenance logs from this period contained references to noises that occurred when no trains were scheduled. The night maintenance supervisor, Robert Holleran, kept detailed records from 1928 until his retirement in 1943. His logs describe sounds emanating from the closed end of the loop, the section where the tunnel curves most sharply before returning northbound. He described it as similar to the sound of a train approaching, but lacking the rhythmic quality of wheels on tracks. It was mechanical, but not quite mechanical. It was metallic, but not quite metallic. It occurred most frequently between 2 and 4 in the morning. Holleran's logs also note that the electrical system in the loop continued to draw power at levels that did not correspond to the lighting load. The meters installed in 1929 recorded consumption consistent with full operational status, even during periods when the station was closed and only emergency lighting should have been active. Multiple inspections failed to identify the source of the excess draw. The electrical contractor's report from March 1931 states, "Unable to locate fault, system operating within acceptable parameters despite discrepancy in measured load. Recommend monitoring but no immediate action required." The question of what was consuming the power was never satisfactorily answered. The station remained lit, fully lit, through the Depression, through the war years, through its final days of operation. Even after closure, the decision was made to maintain full electrical service. The reasoning in the administrative files is sparse. The loop would continue to serve as a turnaround for the downtown 6 train. Maintenance access required lighting. These explanations are technically accurate, but do not account for the intensity of illumination maintained in a space no longer accessible to the public. The curved platform itself presented problems beyond the stated reason for the station's closure. The curve was not uniform. Modern surveys conducted in 1987 as part of a historical preservation assessment revealed that the platform had settled unevenly. The variation was slight, only a few inches over the length of the platform, but enough to create a perceptible tilt. This settling occurred despite the fact that the bedrock beneath the station was supposedly stable. The geological reassessment in 1987 confirmed what the 1899 surveys had indicated. There were voids beneath the station. But the 1987 survey used ground-penetrating radar and identified specific locations and dimensions. Directly beneath the center of the platform, at a depth of approximately 30 feet below the station floor, there was an open space measuring roughly 12 feet in diameter. The origin of this void could not be determined. It was not consistent with natural cave formation in Manhattan schist. It was not the result of previous construction or excavation. It simply existed. The recommendation in the 1987 report was to fill the void with concrete grout to prevent further settling. This work was never performed. The files indicate that budget constraints prevented the project from moving forward, but there is also a notation, handwritten in the margin of the final page, stating access difficulties, drilling not recommended. The notation is not explained further. Workers who maintained the track through the loop reported other irregularities. The rails in the curve required replacement more frequently than rails in other sections of the line. The wear patterns were unusual. Standard rail wear occurs on the top surface from wheel contact and on the gauge face from lateral forces in curves. But the rails in City Hall Loop showed accelerated wear on the underside, where there should be no contact with any moving part. Metallurgical analysis in 1955 attributed this to chemical corrosion, possibly from groundwater. But the tunnel was not wet. Humidity levels were consistent with other underground stations. The corrosion had no identifiable source. Track geometry surveys, conducted every 5 years, showed that the rails in the loop were shifting position. The movement was minimal, measured in millimeters, but it was consistent and directional. The rails were moving inward, toward the center of the curve. This suggested soil subsidence beneath the track bed, but borings taken in 1968 showed that the track bed was stable, supported by solid bedrock. The rails were moving despite having no apparent reason to move. The workers who performed this maintenance worked quickly. The standard procedure for track work required safety protocols, measurements, documentation, but crews assigned to the loop section completed their work faster than crews working other sections, despite the awkward geometry of the curve. When questioned about this efficiency, the workers stated that they preferred not to remain in the loop longer than necessary. The reasons given were vague. The lighting was harsh, the acoustics were disorienting. It was difficult to communicate with crew members even when standing close together. One track worker, James Delacourt, was interviewed in 1972 as part of an oral history project on subway maintenance. He had worked for the Transit Authority for 38 years, retiring in 1971. When asked about challenging work locations, he mentioned City Hall Loop without prompting. He stated that he had worked in every tunnel section of the IRT line, but the loop was the only location where he experienced what he described as the feeling that you should leave. He elaborated, "It wasn't danger. We worked in dangerous places all the time. Water mains breaking, electrical failures. You learn to handle that. This was different. It was the feeling that you were somewhere you weren't supposed to be. Even though we were supposed to be there, we had authorization, but it felt wrong." The temperature in the loop was recorded as part of routine environmental monitoring. Subway tunnels maintain relatively constant temperatures because of their depth and the heat generated by train operation. City Hall Loop was no exception. The temperature remained between 68 and 72 degrees year-round, but workers reported feeling cold in the loop. Not uncomfortable cold, not cold that made you shiver, cold that made you aware of your breathing, cold that made you check over your shoulder. In 1976, the Transit Authority installed motion-sensing lights in several stations as an energy-saving measure. The system was not installed in City Hall Loop. The loop remained fully lit at all times. When asked why the loop was excluded from the energy-saving program, an administrator stated that it was because the loop was still an active turning track for trains. But other active turning tracks received motion-sensing lights. The loop did not. The trains themselves behaved differently in the loop. Motorman reported that the controls felt less responsive in the curve. The trains would slow more gradually than expected, as though meeting resistance beyond the normal friction of wheels on rails. They would accelerate more slowly when exiting the loop, despite full power being applied. The phenomenon was consistent and measurable. Timing records showed that trains took approximately 8 to 12 seconds longer to traverse the loop than the calculated time based on track length and operational speed. Mechanical inspections of the trains found no faults. The motors operated normally, the braking systems functioned as designed, the wheel sets showed normal wear patterns, but the time discrepancy persisted. Motormen learned to anticipate it. They would apply power earlier when entering the loop, brake later when exiting. It became part of the operational routine. No one questioned why. And then there were the photographs. The station had been photographed extensively at its opening in 1904. Additional photographs were taken over the years for engineering documentation, historical preservation, and transit publicity materials. But a particular problem emerged when photographers worked in the loop. Film exposed in the station showed anomalies, light streaks that did not correspond to any light source, dark areas in sections that were fully illuminated. In the transition to digital photography, the problems persisted. Digital sensors recorded artifacts that resembled motion blur, but they appeared in long exposure shots taken with the camera on a tripod with no movement in the frame. One photographer, Maria Castillo, was hired by the Transit Museum in 1998 to create a comprehensive photographic record of the station for archival purposes. She spent 6 hours in the loop over the course of 2 sessions using professional medium format film cameras. Of the 240 exposures she made, 47 were unusable due to what she described as interference. The interference appeared as distortions in the image, most commonly in the background areas behind the platform, in the tunnel sections not directly lit. When developed and enlarged, these distorted areas showed what appeared to be textures or patterns that were not present in the physical space. Castillo's report stated that she had checked her equipment thoroughly and could not identify a technical cause for the problem. The Transit Authority accepted the usable photographs and filed the report. No follow-up investigation was conducted. The station remained lit, the trains continued to use the loop, and deep beneath the tile vaults, in the space that should not exist, something continued to draw power. The decision to close City Hall Loop to passenger service was made in the fall of 1945. The official closure date was December 31st, the last day of the year. The stated reason was the platform's inability to accommodate 10-car trains. This explanation has been repeated in every subsequent document, every historical account, every transit history. It is accurate, but it is not complete. In the 6 months preceding the closure, there was a marked increase in incident reports filed by Transit Authority personnel working in and around the station. These reports are scattered across different administrative departments and were never compiled into a single file. They exist as individual documents in separate archive boxes, which may explain why no pattern was officially recognized. In July 1945, a conductor named William Massey reported that while his train was stopped at the City Hall platform, he observed a passenger standing at the far end of the platform near the tunnel entrance. This was unusual because passengers typically congregated near the center of the platform, where the conductor's position allowed for best visibility. Massey noted the figure in his log as a potential safety concern. When the train departed, he looked back through the rear window, as was his habit. The platform was empty. The figure had not boarded the train. There was no exit from that end of the platform. The only way to leave the platform was through the stairway at the opposite end, and no one had passed the conductor's position. In August, a track inspector named Harold Kovacs was performing routine rail inspection in the loop after midnight. He was alone, as was standard procedure for minor inspections. While examining the rail joints in the deepest part of the curve, he heard footsteps on the platform above. The footsteps moved from one end of the platform to the other, a distance of approximately 400 feet, and then stopped. Kovacs climbed onto the platform to investigate. There was no one present. He checked the stairway to the street level. The gate was locked from the outside. No one could have entered or exited. He completed his inspection and filed a report noting possible acoustic effect from adjacent tunnel sections. His supervisor signed off without comment. In September, 3 separate station agents working different shifts reported equipment malfunctioned in the token booth. The counting machines would stop functioning, the coin slots would jam, the telephones would produce static that made communication impossible. Each time, maintenance would arrive and find the equipment operating normally. The malfunctions always occurred during periods of low traffic, typically in the early morning or late evening when few passengers were present. In October, a maintenance electrician named Samuel Chen was sent to replace a ballast in one of the ceiling light fixtures. The work required a ladder and took approximately 20 minutes. While he was working, standing on the ladder with his back to the platform, he felt what he described as pressure on his lower back, as though someone had placed both hands on him and was pushing gently. He turned around immediately. There was no one within 30 feet. He completed the work as quickly as possible and left. He mentioned the incident to his supervisor, who told him it was probably a draft from the tunnel. The last regular passenger to use City Hall Loop was never identified. On December 31, 1945, service continued until midnight, at which point the station was officially closed. Transit Authority staff were present to direct passengers to use Brooklyn Bridge Station as the new southern terminus. The last train departed at 11:47 p.m. According to the conductor's log, 17 passengers disembarked at City Hall. 16 were counted exiting through the stairway to street level. The 17th was not found. A search of the platform and the station facilities was conducted. No one was present. The discrepancy was attributed to a counting error. After closure, the loop remained in active use as a turning track. Trains would arrive at Brooklyn Bridge, discharge passengers, and continue through the closed City Hall station to reverse direction. This is still the operational procedure. The loop is traversed by approximately 350 trains every day, but it is traversed in darkness. The decision to keep the lights on was reversed in February 1946. With no passengers using the station, there was no justification for maintaining full illumination. The lighting load was reduced to emergency levels. Only 1 in every 3 fixtures remained active, providing enough light for safety but not for regular use. This is standard procedure for closed stations. The new lighting configuration lasted 11 days. On February 24, 1946, motormen began reporting difficulty navigating the loop. The reduced lighting made it difficult to monitor the track ahead. More significantly, trains were experiencing unexplained slowdowns in the curve, more severe than the minor delays that had been documented previously. On 3 occasions in a single day, trains came to a complete unintended stop in the loop and required several seconds to resume motion. The motormen reported that full power was applied, but the trains did not respond immediately. An emergency inspection was ordered. Track crews examined the entire loop section. They found no mechanical obstruction. The rails were clear. The electrical supply to the 3rd rail was uninterrupted. There was no reason for the trains to lose power. The alighting was restored to full operational status on February 26th. The unexplained stops ceased immediately. No explanation for this correlation was offered in the maintenance reports. The decision to maintain full lighting in the closed station was justified as a safety measure for the train operators who traversed the loop. This justification has remained for 80 years. But the motormen still reported problems. The trains would hesitate in the deepest part of the curve. Controls would become momentarily unresponsive, and in the years that followed, several motormen reported seeing figures on the platform as their trains passed through. These reports were dismissed as shadows, tricks of light on the curved tile walls. The reports stopped being filed officially in the 1960s, though motormen continued to mention them informally. In 1991, a track worker named David Ortiz was performing emergency repair work on a broken rail in the loop. The break had been detected by the signal system at approximately 3 a.m. Ortiz and his crew arrived on site within 40 minutes. The repair required cutting out the damaged section of rail and welding in a replacement segment, a procedure that typically takes 2 to 3 hours. At approximately 4:45 a.m., Ortiz was alone on the track while his crew members returned to their work train to retrieve additional equipment. He was kneeling beside the rail, examining the fracture point, when he heard a sound from the platform. He described it as a footfall, a single step on the concrete platform surface. He looked up. There was a man standing on the platform, approximately 50 feet away, near one of the support columns. Ortiz called out, asking if the person needed assistance. There was no response. The figure did not move. Ortiz stood and began walking toward the platform. As he did, the figure moved behind the column. Ortiz continued forward and rounded the column. There was no one there. He examined the area carefully. The only way off the platform was the stairway, which was gated and locked. The gate showed no sign of being opened recently. Ortiz returned to his crew and mentioned what he had seen. One of the other workers told him that several crew members had reported similar experiences over the years. They did not discuss it officially because there was no point. Nothing could be done. The work still had to be completed. The loop still had to be maintained. The lights stayed on. In 2003, the Transit Authority conducted a comprehensive structural survey of the original IRT stations as part of a centennial assessment. City Hall Loop was included in the survey despite being closed. Engineers examined the platform, the ceiling vaults, the support structures, and the foundation. The report concluded that the station was structurally sound and could theoretically be returned to service if the platform were extended to accommodate longer trains. But the report also included a subsection on anomalous findings. The temperature readings taken at various points throughout the station showed a consistent cold spot at the far end of the platform, near the tunnel entrance. The temperature in this location was measured at 56 degrees, more than 10 degrees cooler than the ambient tunnel temperature. The survey team took multiple readings to confirm the discrepancy. They examined the ventilation system for possible drafts, they checked for water infiltration that might create evaporative cooling. No cause was identified. The report noted that the cold spot was localized to an area of approximately 10 feet in diameter. Outside this area, the temperature returned to normal. The phenomenon was described as unexplained but not structurally significant. The survey team also documented sound recordings as part of an acoustic assessment. Microphones were placed at multiple locations throughout the station and recorded continuously for a 72-hour period. The recordings captured the expected sounds of trains passing through the loop. They also captured other sounds. At irregular intervals, there were acoustic events that resembled mechanical noises, metallic impacts, or distant train movements. These sounds occurred when no trains were in the loop. Analysis of the recordings could not determine the source of the sounds. The assessment concluded that they were likely artifacts of sound transmission through the tunnel system from other locations. But one recording, made at 2:17 a.m. on the second day of monitoring, captured something that was not easily dismissed. The sound lasted approximately 4 seconds. It was similar to a human voice, though the words, if there were words, could not be distinguished. The recording was analyzed by multiple audio engineers. None could definitively identify the source. The sound was described in the report as unclear origin, possibly mechanical or environmental. The station remains closed, the loop remains operational, the lights remain on, and every day, hundreds of trains pass through a space where the walls are covered in century-old tiles, where the brass chandeliers still hang from vaulted ceilings, where skylights allow filtered light to fall on a platform no one uses. A space that was built with grandeur and closed with discretion. A space that consumes power without apparent purpose. A space that is, by every practical measure, abandoned. Except that it is not empty. There are 14 other closed stations in the New York City subway system. All have been decommissioned for practical reasons: platform configurations, redundancy with adjacent stations, low ridership. Each has been sealed, its entrances bricked over, its electrical service disconnected. They exist in darkness, silent, preserved only by their inaccessibility. City Hall Loop has not been treated this way. The distinction is not officially acknowledged, but it exists in practice. The loop receives maintenance that exceeds what would be necessary for a simple train turnaround. The tiles are periodically cleaned, the brass fixtures are polished, the skylights are repaired when they crack. These activities are not documented in public maintenance records, but they occur. In 2008, the Transit Museum began offering limited tours of the station. The tours are conducted 4 times per year and are restricted to museum members. The demand far exceeds availability. Thousands of people apply for the few dozen spots available in each tour. The tours last approximately 45 minutes. They consist of a brief ride through the loop on a train that slows but does not stop, followed by a walking tour of the platform. Tour participants have reported consistent experiences. The station is beautiful. The architecture is stunning. The Guastavino tiles create a cathedral-like atmosphere. The brass and the colored glass are remarkable, but there is also a feeling. Tour guides do not mention this feeling. It is not part of the official narrative, but participants mention it to each other afterward. The feeling is that they are being observed, not by other tour participants or by transit authority staff. The feeling is that the station itself is aware of their presence. This sounds like the language of supernatural speculation, but the consistency of the reports suggests something more specific. The space has qualities that affect perception in predictable ways. The acoustics create isolation, the lighting creates shadows in unexpected places, the curve of the platform creates sight lines that truncate suddenly. These are architectural effects, but their cumulative impact is psychological. People on the tours take photographs, the same artifacts that professional photographers documented in the 1990s still appear. Digital images show distortions in the background areas. Light sources appear in the photographs that were not visible during the exposure. Faces occasionally resolve in the patterns of the tiles, a phenomenon known as pareidolia, but the faces appear in the same locations for different photographers on different tours. This suggests that the pattern in the tile is genuinely ambiguous, not that multiple people are experiencing identical hallucinations. One tour participant, Dr. Elizabeth Garrett, a psychologist specializing in environmental perception, attended a tour in 2011. She later wrote an article about the experience for an academic journal on architectural psychology. She described the station as an example of what she termed designed unease. The space was created to be grand and welcoming, but specific architectural choices created subtle perceptual stress. The curve made it impossible to see the entire platform at once. The tile patterns created visual complexity that prevented the eye from finding a resting point. The acoustics prevented accurate sound localization. The result was a space that looked beautiful but felt subtly wrong. Dr. Garrett's article did not mention the supernatural. It did not need to. The argument was that the station's design, combined with its abandonment, created conditions that would naturally produce anxiety and misperception in visitors. The station was not haunted in any traditional sense. It was simply a space where human perception could not achieve stability. But Dr. Garrett's article also included a footnote. She mentioned that during her visit, she had photographed the far end of the platform, the area near the tunnel entrance. When she reviewed the photograph later, she noticed what appeared to be a person standing in the shadows near the tunnel mouth. She was certain no one had been standing there during the tour. She could account for every participant and staff member in her field of vision, but the figure appeared in the photograph. She described it as most likely a visual artifact resulting from the lighting conditions and the tile patterns creating a person-like shape. But she also noted that the shape was more clearly defined than would be expected from random pareidolia. The Transit Museum declined to comment on her article. The question of why the power remains on has never been satisfactorily answered. The operational justification is that the loop is an active turning track, but active turning tracks do not require the level of illumination maintained in City Hall Loop. The loop is lit as though it were still a functioning station. Emergency lighting would be sufficient for train operation. Full lighting serves no operational purpose. Unless the operational purpose is not related to the trains, unless the lighting serves a different function, unless something in the loop requires the presence of light. This is speculation. It is not supported by any official document, but it is consistent with the documented reluctance of transit authority personnel to work in the loop without adequate lighting. It is consistent with the February 1946 incident when reduced lighting corresponded with train malfunctions. It is consistent with the decades-long practice of maintaining full electrical service to a closed station. In 2019, a systems analyst working for the Transit Authority conducted an audit of electricity consumption across the subway system. The audit was routine, part of an initiative to identify opportunities for energy efficiency. The analyst noted that City Hall Loop consumed electricity at a rate consistent with a fully operational station, despite serving only as a turning track. She filed a report recommending that the lighting be reduced to maintenance levels, which would save approximately $18,000 annually. The recommendation was rejected. The explanation was that the station was of historical significance and that maintaining its condition required full lighting. This explanation was technically accurate, but did not address the question of why historical preservation required continuous full-power lighting. The analysts did not pursue the matter further. The geological void beneath the station remains unfilled. The 1987 recommendation to inject concrete was never implemented. The void continues to exist, 30 feet below the platform, a hollow space beneath a hollow station. Its origin is still unexplained. It is not a natural formation. It is not the result of previous construction. It simply exists, a hollow space beneath a hollow station. There are theories. Some suggest it is a sinkhole, though sinkholes do not form in Manhattan schist. Some suggest it is the result of water erosion, though there is no evidence of water flow in the area. Some suggest it is a void left by the excavation process, though the void is too far below the tunnel floor to be related to construction. The most unsettling theory is that the void was there before the tunnel, that the excavation did not create the void, but merely connected to it, that something existed beneath City Hall Park before the subway was ever imagined. This theory has no supporting evidence. It is mentioned here only because it appears repeatedly in the informal accounts of workers who have spent time in the loop. It is the explanation they offer when asked why they prefer not to work there. Not because the station is dangerous, not because the conditions are difficult, but because they feel that the tunnel was built in a place where a tunnel should not be. The loop continues to function. Trains pass through it every few minutes during operating hours. Motormen navigate the curve, apply the brakes, accelerate back toward the Brooklyn Bridge station. The routine is performed thousands of times each week. It has been performed in this way for 80 years. But occasionally, a motorman will report something irregular, a figure on the platform, a sound that does not correspond to train operation, a moment when the controls do not respond as expected. These reports are filed and archived. They are not investigated. There is no protocol for investigating them. The loop is a turning track. The loop is structurally sound. The loop serves its purpose. And deep in the curve, where the tiles form their perfect vaults, where the brass chandeliers hang in rows, where the colored glass skylights filter the pale light from the park above, the station waits. It is empty of passengers. It is closed to the public. It has been bypassed and forgotten by the millions who ride the subway every day. But the lights stay on. Every fixture, every chandelier, every skylight admits its small measure of daylight. The station is illuminated as though expecting arrivals, as though the closure is temporary, as though someone or something requires the light to remain. The City Hall loop is not haunted in any conventional sense. There are no confirmed sightings of ghosts. There are no documented supernatural events. There are only patterns. Patterns of equipment malfunction, patterns of perceptual disturbance, patterns of electrical consumption that exceed operational necessity, patterns of human reluctance to remain in a space that should be perfectly safe. The station is a question without an answer. It exists beneath the administrative heart of the city, a jewel of Beaux-Arts architecture abandoned for practical reasons that may not have been the only reasons. It draws power continuously. It is maintained beyond operational necessity. It affects those who enter it in ways that are consistent but unexplained. And every night, when the last train has passed through, when the tourists have left, when the maintenance crews have finished their work and returned to the surface, the loop remains lit. The chandeliers glow in the emptiness. The tiles reflect the light and patterns of terracotta and cream. The curve of the platform extends into the tunnel, into the darkness beyond the reach of the fixtures, into the space where the rails disappear and the walls close in and the air grows colder without explanation. The loop is not empty. It is occupied by something that does not require human presence, something that was there before the station opened, something that remained after the station closed, something that requires the lights to stay on. The City Hall Loop still has power, and that may be the only thing preventing it from becoming something worse than abandoned.